My name is Cheryl Dolner. I manage Tax Credit Co's partnerships, and I've been with the company just over 5 years. Joining us today will be Sean Anderson. He's Vice President of Business Development at Tax Credit Co. He too has been with the company over 5 years, and he is going to be focusing on a product, a service offering of Tax Credit Co. is near and dear to him, training incentives. And the purpose and the goal of today's session, again, this is fully and 100% designed for and positioned for Tax Credit Co.'s partners. And in the intro to training incentives, reduce training costs with cash grants, he's going to highlight the best and the latest and the greatest about training incentives in the U.S., just a little bit about each of the, the best programs out there, which states they're in, and how you might be able to speak about this with your clients or prospects. But it's just another great offering from Tax Credit Co. to help you sell more of your service and bring a greater ROI to your services to your clients and prospects. So with that, Sean, go ahead.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for that introduction. And hello to everyone. Thank you all for joining today. And I hope you enjoy the session. So as Cheryl said, we're going to talk today about training incentives. We're going to talk a little bit about the overview, what training incentives are. We're going to talk about the value proposition that TCC can bring, and also training incentive state programs. We're going to touch on a few about training incentive, give a couple examples of state programs, and then go into some actual case studies. So what are training incentive programs? Well, a lot of you have learned from us and maybe other places about hiring credits such as research and development, the WASI, California Enterprise Zone credits. Training grants are very similar, and they're offered by states to incent companies to do something they might not ordinarily do, is train their employees, or increase the training programs that they currently have in place. So the difference here, unlike most hiring credits, the incentives are typically given in a cash grant, which is actually reimbursed from the state for actual costs of training. So it's not a credit in most cases that is used against any tax liability. The main incentive for training programs is to increase employee skill sets, increase job retention, trainee wages, and make sure that they are increased from being able to have better education, and then grow the industry that they're in. So there's many reasons for these training grants in the different states. So who's interested in a training incentive in a company? Well, definitely tax and finance. Always interested in these incentives, mainly because they're in the form of a cash grant. And we have a lot of companies, if they're already spending $100,000 now on training in a certain state that has these training programs, why not have the state pay 50 to 75% of that and offset the cost of training? And then it does allow for reduction in expenses and direct increase in the bottom line. From an HR and operations standpoint, training incentives really incent the HR and operations to increase their employee training and skill set. Go above and beyond what they're doing today, or start a training program. Typically, these departments have limited or no training budgets officially, and are looking for, as cost centers. So these training incentives allow them to become, in some respects, a revenue center. So what should you be looking for from a possible opportunity for a company that you're dealing with for training incentives? Companies with 100 plus employees are probably the best candidates. However, companies with less than 100 employees in certain states have some very lucrative training grant programs. But typically it's for 100 plus employees, and most of the incentives are geared towards companies that are paying higher wages, have high skill sets in technology and other areas, and tend to have low turnover, high job retention. So some of the targeted industries in many of the states are manufacturing, Obviously, the high tech and biotech are very popular. Healthcare is always a good candidate for training grants. Information services, finance, distribution centers are very good, and then corporate headquarters where there's a lot of training. So bottom line is, even if these industries are good candidates, the business still must meet certain criteria by the state, which is different from almost every state, before they're eligible for the training incentives. So how do you recognize an opportunity? So if you're working with a business and you see some of these indicators, which we say positive indicators, if they're increasing their headcount, training a large workforce, adding new business lines or new technology, and new software and training that software, those are great opportunities. If they're increasing their training year over year, and if they have high skill sets of training rather than just the HR. And then the last thing really, if they're spending a large amount of money to train a workforce. Many organizations are doing that and not taking advantage of these programs. So what should you avoid? What incentives typically are not awarded? So the statutory are really ineligible. Probably the biggest thing is the second bullet, failure to meet wage and turnover requirements that are established by these programs for the company. And the third thing really is minimal amount of employees that are being trained. So those are really the top three things that are important to recognize for probably not being awarded a grant. Typical industries that potentially have problems meeting eligibility requirements are retail and restaurants, call centers, hotels, skilled nursing facilities, and security companies. And if you look at all of these industries, these are all high turnover type of industries, which, based on most state programs, really require employees to stay for a certain period of time to be allowed to have these training grants reimbursed. So a little bit about the training incentive application process that we have. It's very, I say very straightforward. Typically, once we have a prospect where we've kind of determined by doing a free assessment, which is what we do for all of our programs, upfront to see if there's an opportunity there. Once we decide that we want to move forward, the first phase is discovery and preparation, where our training grant group will work with the client and basically review the company's current and proposed training programs. And that typically is a one-day, either over the phone or on-site type of meeting. The next phase is the application and budget data collection. And that's going to take, depending on the client, 1 to 4 weeks. And during that time, the TCC training grant area is collecting all the components to begin to put together the application for the state. And the client, time is starting to be less and less for this, is especially if they have this data and this material already in place and just supply it to our training group. The third phase, which takes about 2 weeks, is the proposal and presentation. So we actually would formulate the incentive package and have that application ready to present. Obviously, the client would be in a review phase and making sure everything is accurate of what they want to do and what they're currently doing. And then the incentive delivery, based on the program, once it's been awarded, we provide a compliance management, if you will, to help and make sure that the companies do comply with the state regulations to get reimbursed. And we have special tools, and we partner with the client to make sure that they are using those to fully get reimbursed by the state. So what's the TCC value proposition for training grants? Basically, we offer both the negotiating side and the customized compliance side of the service. Not everyone in the training grant world does that. So not only do we write the grants and present to the state on behalf of the client, we also help the client with the compliance side. Most of our major competitors are local-based firms, and they're specifically just in that state. The third bullet, training grants or programs are offered in numerous states, and they open and close on a regular basis. And we will work with any state or any available program that the client may have available for them. Training centers are excellent opportunity for, again, almost any company from 100 employees up that have quality jobs and in need of training. We can help them with that. And then really the value, we've done a lot of these training incentives, and we're averaging about $10 million a year across numerous states for our clients, and that's a huge a program that we are very proud of. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about a couple of states, and I've got about 5 to 10 minutes here. I want to talk a little bit about some of the more popular states that are out there right now. These are not the only states, but some of the ones that do have open programs as we talk today. The first one is the Arizona Net New. So it's really a grant that is approved for companies who are adding headcount. So if you are a company that is adding new incremental jobs to your existing facilities in Arizona, or transferring individuals from another state, employees from another state to Arizona, those are defined as net new positions. Approximately 8 companies per month receive these awards. It's a first come, first served type of a program. When the award is presented and it's approved and there's money, which there is money, it will get approved for the client. Typically, but not always, it's usually if there's an increase in headcount for grantees between 25 and 50, but over 50 is better. And the typical grant is between $300,000 and $500,000. Whereas in Arizona here, the maximum award per company could be up to $1.5 million in reimbursement. So the program supports customized training, covers 75% of direct training expenses. For example, cost of instructors, internal or external, which is pretty nice, materials, and reasonable travel expenses are also covered. The qualifying training is any job-specific training which is not already mandated by law or to maintain a license. So it's above and beyond that. And the training, there is a wage requirement that is $28,000 for companies, an average of $28,000 for companies under 100 employees, and an average of $40,000 for companies greater than 100 employees. And that's throughout. So if a company has 250 employees and they're across the country, they would fall under the greater than 100 category. Georgia is another interesting state with what they call retraining credit. This is one of the few that are not a grant. It's actually a state credit that is earned by a company. Excuse me. It's worth up to a little over $1,200 per employee and covers 50% of the direct training expenses. Again, includes instructors and teaching materials, eligible wages, and reasonable travel expenses. This is a little different. The qualified training is designed to enhance quality and productivity, or to teach certain software technology, and it's training for new software. So if you have an organization that is training on whatever today, it's not really going to cover that ongoing training. But if you bring in a new software system, if you bring in some new technology and you're training on that, that would be eligible for this program. So the Georgia Retraining Awards, like I said, come in the form of tax credits, and offset up to 50% of the Georgia corporate income tax, and any unused credit can be carried forward for up to 10 years. Florida Job Training Grant. This is an interesting program here where it supports customized training to help increase the skills and levels of employees in Florida, like most states. The grant here is available not only for new hires or net new, but also for incumbent or existing employees working for a company. The grant will match up to 50% of training costs, and again, it includes external vendors, instructors' wages, so on and so forth. The interesting thing here is the maximum amount that Florida will give per grant is $50,000. per company's FEIN. So it's not lucrative per se. It's not like 1.5 million in Arizona, but it's a relatively simple grant to obtain. It's funded through the Federal Workforce Investment Act of Florida and administered by CareerSource in Florida. So they have to be a for-profit employer with at least one business location in the state, and excludes retail, nonprofits, government agencies, and labor unions. Not every state excludes all of these, but again, I need to stress every state has a different program and different requirements. Massachusetts is another very popular state, and the training grants, this is a grant, is directed towards competitively for employers and employer organizations, labor organizations, training providers, and or a consortium of such entities to train either current or new hired workers. Approximately 25 companies per quarter receive this, so it's pretty active. And typical industry that is receiving grants is a manufacturing with between 50 and 100 employees. And the typical grant is 100 to 250,000, with a maximum being $250,000. Excuse me. The program supports custom training and covers 50% of direct training costs and the cost of an external vendor. So this state really pushes the companies to use external vendors for their training. It's a really big part of this program. It also covers materials and, like most other programs, reasonable travel expenses as well. And a qualified training is any job-specific training which is not already mandated by law or to maintain a license. California ETP. This is called ETP, is Employee Training Panel, and it's designed. California's a little different. It's designed to ensure businesses have skilled workers and remain competitive. It's funded by this tax group. It's not a grant, but pay for performance contracts. It pays and plays a flat hourly fee for each hour of eligible training. So the grant is calculated a little different than most states. It's done on an hourly fee, a flat fee, versus wages and so on and so forth. The employer can choose topics and delivery methods for training. It's very wide open in that respect. It allows for both new and existing workers to be trained. Several programs available. Best for companies facing out-of-state competition is really another criteria that they're really looking at. If a company doesn't face out-of-state, it's going to have a hard time getting a grant awarded. Last year there was over 40 million in contracts approved, and I believe now the new maximum credit for California, I believe, is $450,000 for one company. And it's open to permanent full-time employees working at least over 35 hours per week. So I have a couple of case studies here briefly. We had in Arizona a couple years ago an insurance brokerage with 35 employees, current 35 employees here outside of Phoenix. And they were going to increase their head count by 150 employees over the next 2-year period. They needed a lot of technical training to get this done, and they needed to pay for it on their own. So they were going to, we saw an opportunity here, bring this to them, and they typically do this training online, which they had already had a process set up for that. But when we worked through the whole grant with them and we showed them the amount of money that they could get back for the net new here, they decided to pay for live instruction, which they had told us was a tremendous benefit over the online. So they ended up training 120 employees under this proposal, and they were awarded a grant over 2 years of $336,000, which I believe they have used most of that up to date. A California case study where there was a rehabilitation hospital in LA. The company was implementing an electronic medical record system in their facility. That raised a lot of eyebrows. They were also in California They also give some benefit to locations that are in high unemployment areas, which are typically urban areas. So 2 of their locations were high unemployment areas, which actually lowers the average wage for those people that are being trained. So they train the medical staff and the administrative staff on the EMR, and they ended up training 178 employees and were awarded a contract. It's not called a grant in California, it's called a contract of $357,000 to do that training. So that's all that I have for now. My contact information, Cheryl's contact information is there. And Cheryl, I'm sure that you can complete this. I know you want to take some many questions and then give the audience some direction on what they would expect from an email and how to get the PowerPoint. So Cheryl?
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, great. So we are going to send out a copy of this presentation. If you have any questions right now, you can go ahead and put it in the chat section. So we'll hold on for a couple of minutes if anyone asks a question. But we will be sending out a follow-up email with opportunity for a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording. We will be doing a follow-up webinars, again, targeted for partners, and it'll be on a different subject. Going into one in November and one in December, and we'll be sending out those topics here soon. So are there any questions from the audience? If not, you're free to go. Thank you so much for your participation in today's webinar. Anyone? We'll hang here for a couple of minutes if there's anyone interested in asking